The rain hammered against the metal roof of the abandoned warehouse like bullets from heaven. Marcus Chun pulled his worn jacket tighter around his shoulders and checked his chronometer for the third time in 10 minutes. The smugglers were late, which meant either they were being extra careful or something had gone very wrong. At 42 years old, Marcus carried the weight of 3 wars across his scarred shoulders. The Centauri conflict had taken his left eye. The vegan uprising had left him with a limp that never quite went away. The Third Colonial War had given him nightmares that visited him every time he closed his eyes. Now, 2 years after his discharge from the Terran Defense Force, he made his living moving things from one place to another without asking too many questions. The door at the far end of the warehouse creaked open, and Marcus tensed. His hand moved instinctively to the plasma pistol holstered under his arm. But instead of the gruff smugglers he expected, a small figure stumbled through the doorway, soaked to the bone and shivering. It was a child, a very unusual child. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, but her skin had a subtle scaled texture that caught the dim light. Her eyes were large and golden, with vertical pupils that marked her as definitely not human. Small, barely visible horns protruded from her forehead, and when she opened her mouth to gasp for air, Marcus caught a glimpse of teeth that were just a little too sharp. A dragon child. Marcus had heard about them, but never seen one up close. The Draconian Empire had been humanity's greatest enemy during the Third Colonial War. Their ships had turned entire human colonies into glass. Their warriors had been nightmares given form, breathing fire and shrugging off weapons that could level buildings. But this was just a scared little girl. She spotted Marcus across the warehouse and froze like a deer in headlights. For a moment, they stared at each other across the empty space. Then, the child took a tentative step forward. "Please," she said in accented English, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need help. My mother, she's dying." Marcus didn't move. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away. Dragons were trouble. Dragon children were probably worse trouble. He had enough problems without adding interstellar incidents to his list. But the kid looked so small, so scared. "Where are your parents?" he asked carefully. "My mother is in a ship. Hidden ship. She's hurt very bad. Please, I heard humans are good at healing. I heard you fix things that others cannot fix." The girl took another step closer, and Marcus could see she was trembling. Not from cold, though the warehouse was freezing. From fear. "Kid, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a guy waiting for some people who apparently aren't going to show up." "You are human, yes? You are from Terra?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm from Earth. But that doesn't mean I can help your mother." The child's golden eyes filled with tears. "Please. She saved me from bad dragons. Bad dragons who wanted to hurt me. We ran away, but they shot our ship. Mother is bleeding inside. I don't know what to do." She reached into a small pouch at her waist and pulled out something that made Marcus's breath catch. It was a crystal the size of his fist, glowing with internal fire. Even from across the warehouse, he could feel the energy radiating from it. "I can pay," the girl said. "This is energy crystal. Very valuable. Worth more than small ship." Marcus knew exactly how valuable it was. Energy crystals were the most sought-after substance in the galaxy. That single crystal could buy him a new identity, a ship of his own, and enough credits to live comfortably for the rest of his life. "Kid, where did you get that?" "Mother gave it to me. She said humans value these things. She said if something happened to her, I should find a human and trade this for help. The smart thing would be to take the crystal and walk away. Dragons were dangerous, even wounded ones. Getting involved with rebel dragons who were being hunted by their own kind was practically suicide." But the girl was crying now, silent tears streaming down her scaled cheeks. She looked so much like his own daughter might have looked if Sarah had lived past her 5th birthday. If the vegan rebels hadn't bombed that civilian transport. Damn it, Marcus muttered under his breath. He looked around the warehouse once more, then back at the girl. "What's your name, kid?" "Zara," she whispered. "My name is Zara." "Okay, Zara. I am Marcus. And, against my better judgment, I'm going to help you. But, first, you need to tell me exactly what happened. No lies, No leaving things out. If I'm going to stick my neck out for you and your mother, I need to know what I'm getting into. Zara wiped her nose with the back of her hand and nodded eagerly. Mother's name is Kisara. She was scientist for Dragon Empire. She worked on new weapons. Very dangerous weapons. But she found out they were going to use weapons on children. Human children and dragon children both. She said it was wrong. She said no one should hurt children, no matter what species they are. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold warehouse. What kind of weapons? Virus weapons. Made to kill by changing DNA. Empire wanted to test on prisoners. Mother said no. She tried to destroy research. But other scientists stopped her. They said she was traitor. They wanted to arrest her. So she ran. She took me and ran. But Empire sent hunters. Fast ships with big guns. They found us 3 days ago. Shot our ship before we could jump to light speed. We crashed on this planet. Mother got hurt very bad when ship hit ground. Marcus processed this information. A dragon scientist who had grown a conscience was valuable to a lot of people. The Terran government would pay handsomely for information about dragon bioweapons. But they'd also want the scientist alive to tell them everything she knew. How did you find me? He asked. I monitored communications. Heard smugglers talking about meeting place. I thought maybe smugglers would help, but you were first person I found. Smart kid. Dangerous situation, but smart kid. Marcus made his decision. All right, Zura, I'll come take a look at your mother. But I'm warning you now, I'm not a doctor. If she's as badly hurt as you say, there might not be anything I can do. The relief on Zara's face was heartbreaking. Thank you. Thank you so much. I will show you where ship is hidden. They left the warehouse together, stepping out into the driving rain. Zara led him through the industrial district of New Sarajevo, keeping to the shadows and avoiding the main streets. The kid moved like she'd had training in stealth, which was both impressive and concerning for someone so young. New Sarajevo was a rough frontier city on the edge of human space. It was the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't ask too many questions. Perfect for smugglers, pirates, and apparently refugee dragons. After 20 minutes of walking through increasingly desolate areas, Zara stopped at what looked like an abandoned factory complex. She led Marcus through a gap in the chain-link fence and around to a building that had clearly been gutted by fire years ago. Ship is hidden inside, she whispered. They climbed through a broken window, and Marcus immediately understood why no one had discovered the crash site. The dragon ship had punched through the roof of the building and embedded itself in the concrete floor. Someone had hastily covered the hole in the roof with tarps and debris, making it invisible from above. The ship was smaller than Marcus had expected, barely bigger than a civilian transport. But the hull was composed of that strange dragon metal that seemed to shift color in different light. It was also heavily damaged. Scorch marks covered one side, and there was a gaping hole in what he assumed was the engine section. Mother is inside, Zara said, her voice tight with worry. She has not spoken since yesterday. They climbed through an access hatch on the underside of the ship. The interior was cramped but efficient, clearly designed for long-range travel by a small crew. Everything was sized for beings larger than humans, which made Marcus feel like he was exploring a giant's house. Zara led him to what appeared to be the living quarters. On a bed that was too large for her lay the most magnificent creature Marcus had ever seen. Kisara was clearly an adult dragon in her humanoid form, about 7 feet tall with the same scaled skin as her daughter. But where Zara's scales were a soft silver green, Kisara's were deep emerald shot through with veins of gold. Her face was elegant and alien, with high cheekbones and those same golden eyes. But those eyes were closed now, and her breathing was shallow and labored. My God, Marcus whispered. Is she going to die? Zara asked, her voice breaking. Marcus moved closer to examine Kisara's injuries. He'd seen enough battlefield trauma to recognize internal bleeding when he saw it. Her skin had a grayish pallor underneath the scales, and there was dried blood at the corner of her mouth. I need to scan her, he said, pulling a medical scanner from his kit. It was military-grade equipment, designed to work on multiple species. This might tell us how bad it is. The scanner beeped and hummed as it passed over Kisara's body. Marcus studied the readout with growing concern. The dragon had multiple internal injuries, including a ruptured spleen and internal bleeding in her abdomen. Without immediate surgery, she would be dead within hours. Zara, he said carefully, your mother is very sick. She needs surgery that I can't do here. We need to get her to a hospital. No, Zara said immediately. No hospitals. Empire has spies everywhere. They will find us. Then, she's going to die. Zara started crying again, but this time there was desperation in it. Please, there must be something. You are human. Humans always find a way. That's what Mother told me. She said humans never give up. Marcus looked at the dying dragon and the crying child and felt the familiar weight of impossible choices. He'd faced them before in war zones across the galaxy. Save the mission or save the civilians. Follow orders or follow conscience. Live with the guilt or die with honor. He made the same choice he'd always made. There might be a way, he said slowly, but it's dangerous, and you're not going to like it. Zara looked up at him with desperate hope. Tell me, there's a black market doctor on the other side of the city. Guy named Dr. Vasquez. He's got a full surgical suite, and he doesn't ask questions as long as you can pay. But getting your mother there without killing her is going to be nearly impossible. And even if we manage it, there's no guarantee she'll survive the surgery. We have to try. Marcus nodded. All right, but first, I need you to understand something. Once we start this, there's no going back. If the Empire is really hunting you, helping you makes me a target too. They'll come after me just like they're coming after you. Zara met his eyes with a maturity that was startling in someone so young. Why would you do that? You don't know us. We are dragons. Your people, and my people have been enemies. It was a fair question. Marcus thought about all the reasons he shouldn't help them. The danger, the complications, the fact that the smart move was to walk away and pretend he'd never met them. Then he thought about Sarah and all the children who had died in wars they didn't understand, fought by adults who had forgotten that some things were more important than politics and species loyalty. Because, he said finally, sometimes doing the right thing is more important than doing the smart thing. And leaving a kid to watch her mother die is never the right thing. Zara threw her arms around him in a fierce hug. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Marcus awkwardly patted her back. Don't thank me yet, kid. We've got a long night ahead of us. He spent the next hour rigging a makeshift stretcher for materials in the ship and figuring out how to transport a 7-foot dragon across the city without being detected. It was going to require every trick he'd learned in 3 wars, and a good bit of luck besides. But as he worked, he caught Zara watching him with those golden eyes, and he realized something that surprised him. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like he was doing something that mattered. Something that wasn't just about survival or profit or getting through another day. He was saving a life. Maybe 2 lives. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth the risk. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the footprints they'd left and covering the sounds of their desperate preparation. In a few hours, they would attempt the most dangerous journey of Marcus's life. But for now, in the quiet of the hidden ship, he listened to Kisara's labored breathing and tried to remember every piece of medical training the military had ever given him, because he had a feeling he was going to need it all before this was over. The war between humans and dragons was supposed to be finished. But as Marcus looked at the trust in Zara's eyes, he realized that for some of them, the real war was just beginning. Hashtag when a dragon child trusted a human veteran. Story part 2. Moving a 7-foot unconscious dragon through a city without being detected was like trying to smuggle a small spaceship in a shopping bag. Marcus had transported contraband, weapons, and even people across hostile territory before, but never anything quite like this. He'd spent 2 hours modifying an old hovercart he'd found in the abandoned factory. With some creative welding and a lot of prayer, he turned it into something that could carry Kisara's weight, while looking like nothing more than industrial equipment being moved at night. The real challenge was Kisara herself. Even unconscious, Her body temperature was significantly higher than a human's, and her breathing produced small puffs of what might have been smoke. Dragons, even in their humanoid forms, were essentially living furnaces. "We need to keep her covered," Marcus explained to Zara as they carefully lifted Kisara onto the modified cart. "And you need to stay close to me. If anyone asks, you're my niece, and we're moving equipment for my job." Zara nodded solemnly. She'd found some human clothes in the ship's storage compartments, probably taken from previous encounters with humans. They were too big for her, but they helped disguise her more obvious dragon features. "What if she wakes up?" Zara asked. "Then we're all in trouble. Dragons in pain don't exactly think clearly, and your mother is carrying enough adrenaline suppressants to keep her under for hours." They began their journey through the dark streets of New Sarajevo. Marcus chose a route that avoided the main thoroughfares, sticking to industrial areas and back alleys where night shift workers and late-night smugglers were common sights. The city was a maze of old Earth architecture mixed with alien influences from a dozen different species. Humans had built New Sarajevo as a trading post, but it had grown into something more complex and dangerous over the decades. It was the kind of place where 3 different species might live on the same block and never speak to each other. They were halfway to Dr. Vasquez's clinic when things went wrong. The hover cart's anti-grav unit, stressed beyond its design limits by Kisara's weight, began to emit a high-pitched whine. Marcus recognized the sound immediately and grabbed Zara's arm. "Move," he said urgently. "That thing's about to fail." They had just enough time to pull the cart into an alley before the anti-grav unit died completely. Kisara's weight crashed down onto the cart's wheels, which promptly broke under the sudden load. "Can you fix it?" Zara asked desperately. Marcus examined the unit with a flashlight. The motivator coils were fried, and the power coupling had cracked under the strain. It would take hours to repair, even if he had the right parts. "No," he said. "We need another way." They were still 4 kilometers from the clinic in the middle of the warehouse district. At this time of night, there was almost no traffic, which meant any vehicle they did see would be memorable to whoever was driving it. "Can we call for help?" Zara suggested, not without explaining why we're transporting an unconscious dragon through the city. That's the kind of conversation that tends to attract unwanted attention. Marcus thought furiously. They needed transportation, but everything he could think of involved risks they couldn't afford to take. Stealing a vehicle would bring police attention. Calling a transport service would leave electronic records. Walking would take too long, and Kisara was getting worse by the hour. Then he heard something that made him smile grimly. The distant rumble of a freight hauler coming down the main street. "Zara, can you stay with your mother for a few minutes?" "Yes, but where are you going?" "To catch us a ride." Marcus crept to the mouth of the alley and peered out. A massive freight hauler was approaching, probably carrying cargo containers from the spaceport to the industrial district. The driver would be alone in the cab, and the hauler's automated systems would keep it moving even if the driver was distracted. He waited until the hauler was directly in front of the alley, then stepped out into the street and raised his hands in a universal signal for help. The driver, a tired-looking human woman in her 50s, brought the massive vehicle to a stop and lowered her window. "You okay, friend?" she called out. "Engine trouble," Marcus replied, gesturing back toward the alley. "Wonder if I could trouble you for a lift? Just need to get to the industrial district." The woman studied him for a moment. Marcus knew he looked harmless enough, just another working-class guy having a bad night. His military bearing was hidden under civilian clothes, and his scars weren't visible in the dim light. "Sure, climb in," she said finally. "Name's Helen." "Marcus. Thanks, I really appreciate this." He walked back to the alley as if he were collecting his belongings, then returned to the hauler with Zara in tow. "This is my niece," he explained. "We were moving some equipment when our cart broke down." Helen looked at Zara with mild curiosity. The girl's scale features were mostly hidden by her oversized clothes and a cap pulled low over her face. "Cute kid," Helen said. "Climb in." Getting Kisara onto the hauler without Helen noticing was going to require a miracle. Or a distraction. Actually, Marcus said, I just realized I left something important back there. Could you give me a hand? It's pretty heavy. Helen sighed, but climbed down from the cab. What exactly are we moving? Marcus led her back toward the alley while making conversation about the fictional equipment they were transporting. Meanwhile, Zara used her dragon's strength to lift her mother onto the back of the freight hauler. Dragons, even children, were stronger than they looked. By the time Marcus and Helen returned to the hauler, Kisara was hidden under a tarp among the legitimate cargo containers. To anyone not looking closely, she appeared to be just another piece of covered equipment. All set, Marcus said cheerfully. Thanks again for the help. They climbed back into the cab, and Helen resumed driving. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus made small talk while keeping one eye on the cargo area behind them. Kisara remained unconscious, but her breathing was becoming more labored. You folks new in town? Helen asked. Just passing through, Marcus replied. Work opportunities, you know how it is. Helen nodded knowingly. New Sarajevo's good for people who don't ask too many questions. Been driving freight here for 15 years, and I've learned it's best to mind your own business. Sounds like good advice. Of course, sometimes you run into situations where minding your own business just isn't the right thing to do, Helen continued. Like when someone's trying to help a sick friend, even if that friend is a little unusual. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. I'm sorry. Helen glanced in her rearview mirror at the cargo area. Friend of yours is running a pretty high fever back there. Can practically feel the heat from here. Also, that's definitely not human breathing I'm hearing. Marcus's hand moved instinctively toward his concealed weapon, then stopped. Helen didn't seem hostile, just observant. I don't want any trouble, he said carefully. Neither do I. But I've got grandchildren, and I wouldn't want them suffering if there was something I could do to help. Helen looked at him steadily. Whoever she is back there, she's in bad shape. Zara spoke up for the first time since getting in the hauler. Please don't hurt my mother. Helen's expression softened when she heard the fear in the child's voice. I'm not going to hurt anyone, sweetheart. But if your mama's as sick as she sounds, she needs help fast. Marcus made a decision. There's a clinic about 2 kilometers from here. If you could get us there. Dr. Vasquez's place? Yeah, I know it. Patched me up a few times when the regular hospitals were asking too many questions about industrial accidents. Helen checked her mirrors and changed course. Don't worry, I'll get you there. The rest of the trip passed in relative silence. Helen asked no more questions, and Marcus was grateful for her discretion. When they finally reached the clinic, she helped them unload Kisara without comment. Dr. Vasquez's clinic was hidden in the basement of what appeared to be an ordinary apartment building. The doctor himself was a short, stocky man with graying hair and hands that were steady despite his obvious age. He took one look at Kisara and immediately started issuing orders. Operating room 2 now. Get her on the table. What species is she, and were her injuries? Dragon, humanoid form, Marcus replied quickly. Internal bleeding, probable ruptured spleen, multiple contusions. Dr. Vasquez didn't even blink at the fact that they'd brought him a dragon. In his line of work, he'd probably seen stranger things. Dragon physiology is tricky, he muttered as he began his examination. Higher body temperature, denser bone structure, accelerated healing if she survives the trauma. This is going to take hours. Can you save her? Zara asked desperately. The doctor looked at the child with kind eyes. I'm going to try, little one. But I need you and your friend to wait outside while I work. The waiting room was a stark, sterile space with uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines. Marcus sat down heavily, suddenly feeling every one of his 42 years. The adrenaline that had carried him through the night was starting to wear off, leaving him exhausted and worried. Zara paced the small room like a caged animal, her dragon heritage showing in the predatory grace of her movements. Every few minutes, she would stop at the door to the operating room and listen intently. She's going to be okay, Marcus said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. How do you know? Zara asked. Because she's your mother, and mothers are tough. Tougher than anyone gives them credit for. Zara finally sat down beside him. Tell me about your daughter. Marcus looked at her in surprise. How did you know I had a daughter? You get sad when you look at me. The same kind of sad mother gets when she talks about my father. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Her name was Sarah. She would have been about your age now. What happened to her? She was on a transport ship when the war started. Rebels bombed it, thinking it was carrying military supplies. It was actually carrying children evacuating from a border colony. Zara was quiet, processing this information. Is that why you hate dragons? I don't hate dragons, Marcus said, surprising himself with the honesty of the statement. I hate war. I hate the people who start wars and the people who profit from them. But I don't hate entire species because of what their governments do. The Empire says humans are evil, that you destroy everything you touch. Maybe we do. We're good at breaking things, but we're also good at fixing them. And sometimes we're good at protecting things that need protecting. They sat in comfortable silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts. The operating room remained ominously quiet, with only the occasional sound of medical equipment to indicate that anything was happening beyond those doors. After what felt like hours, Dr. Vasquez finally emerged. He looked exhausted, and there was blood on his surgical gown. She's stable, he said, and Marcus felt a rush of relief. The surgery went better than I expected. Dragons heal fast once you get the bleeding stopped. She should make a full recovery, though it'll be a few days before she's conscious. Zara burst into tears of relief and threw her arms around the surprised doctor. Thank you, she sobbed. Thank you so much. Dr. Vasquez patted her back awkwardly. She can stay here for a few days while she recovers. But you should know that word travels fast in this city. If someone's looking for you, they'll find this place eventually. We'll be gone as soon as she can travel, Marcus assured him. Good. Now about my fee. Zara immediately reached for her pouch, but Marcus stopped her. How much, he asked. For surgery on a dragon? 50,000 credits. Marcus whistled low. It was more money than he'd made in the past year combined. But Zara was already pulling out the energy crystal. This should be enough, she said, offering it to the doctor. Dr. Vasquez's eyes widened when he saw the crystal. Kid, this thing is worth 10 times what I'm charging you. I don't care, Zara said firmly. You saved my mother. That's worth everything. The doctor looked at Marcus, who shrugged. It's her crystal document. And her mother. Dr. Vasquez carefully took the crystal and examined it with a professional eye. This is definitely genuine. High-grade energy crystal, probably from the draconian inner worlds. Where did you get this? It belonged to my father, Zara said quietly. Mother said he wanted me to have it, in case I ever needed to buy my freedom. The weight of that statement settled over the room. Marcus realized that he was looking at a child whose parents had prepared her for the possibility that she might need to buy her way to safety. The thought made him angry at the universe in general. All right, Dr. Vasquez said finally. The crystal covers everything, including medication and recovery time. But I want to give you some change. He disappeared into his office and returned with a credit stick. There's 20,000 credits on here. Should be enough to get you transport off this planet, if that's what you're planning. Marcus stared at him. Doc, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I've been running this clinic for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of desperate people. But I've never had a child offer me everything she had to save her mother's life. He handed the credit stick to Zara. Take it, and be careful who you trust from here on out. They spent the next 3 days at the clinic while Kisara recovered. Marcus found himself acting as an unofficial bodyguard, keeping watch while Zara rarely left her mother's side. The doctor's fears about word traveling proved unfounded, or at least premature. No Imperial hunters appeared, and no local authorities came asking questions. On the 3rd day, Kisara finally woke up. Marcus was dozing in a chair when he heard Zara's excited cry. He opened his eyes to see the dragon woman sitting up in bed, her golden eyes alert and focused. Mother! Zara threw herself into Kisara's arms, tears streaming down her face. Kisara held her daughter tightly, speaking in the musical language of the dragons. Then her eyes found Marcus, and she studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You are the human who saved us," she said in accented English. "Your daughter saved you," Marcus replied. "I just provided transportation." Kisara smiled, and despite her alien features, the expression was warm and genuine. "Zara told me what you did, what you risked. Why?" It was the same question Zara had asked, and Marcus still didn't have a good answer. Seemed like the right thing to do. The right thing would have been to turn us into your authorities. They would have paid you well for a Dragon Empire scientist. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Maybe, but they wouldn't have paid me anything for a dead dragon. And your daughter would have been left alone. Kisara was quiet for a long moment. "You mentioned that you lost a child." "Yeah, a long time ago. Not so long, I think. The pain is still fresh in your eyes." Kisara shifted carefully in the bed, wincing slightly. "I understand why you helped us. But I also know that you have put yourself in great danger. The Empire will not forget this kindness. Let me worry about the Empire." "No," Kisara said firmly. "You have done enough. More than enough. From this point, Zara and I will manage on our own." "Mother," Zara interjected, "where will we go? We can't go back to the Empire. And we don't know anyone else who might help us." It was a fair point. Two refugee dragons on a human frontier world had very few options, especially with Imperial hunters potentially still searching for them. "There might be a way," Marcus said slowly. "It's not without risks, but it might be your best chance for a real fresh start." Both dragons looked at him expectantly. The Terran government has a witness protection program for defectors from hostile governments. If Kisara is willing to share what she knows about the Empire's bioweapon research, they provide new identities, relocation, and protection. Kisara considered this. And what would they want in return? Everything you know about the weapons program. Research data, personnel involved, testing procedures, projected timelines. They'd want it all. That information could be used to develop countermeasures, Kisara mused. It could save lives. Both human and dragon lives, Marcus agreed. The Empire might try to use those weapons against their own people eventually. But it would also mean we could never go home, Zara said quietly. Kisara took her daughter's hand. "Little star, we lost our home the moment I decided to oppose the weapons program. The Empire will never forgive what I've done. Our choice is not between safety and home. Our choice is between survival and death." They talked through the details for the next hour. Marcus explained the process for contacting Terran intelligence, the likely debriefing procedures, and what their new life might look like. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be safe. As they made their plans, Marcus found himself thinking about his own future. He'd spent 2 years drifting through the frontier systems, taking smuggling jobs, and trying to forget the wars he'd fought. But helping Kisara and Zara had reminded him what it felt like to fight for something that mattered. Maybe it was time to stop running from his past and start building a future. Dr. Vasquez released Kisara the next morning with strict instructions about rest and medication. Marcus had already contacted his old handler in Terran intelligence, and arrangements were being made for a secure meeting. As they prepared to leave the clinic, Zara surprised Marcus by hugging him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. Take care of your mother, kid. And remember what I told you about humans. We're not all bad." Zara smiled up at him. "I know. You showed me that." Kisara shook his hand with surprising gentleness. "Marcus Chun, you have given us the most precious gift possible. You have given us hope. If you ever need anything at all, find a way to contact us. Dragons do not forget debts of honor." Marcus watched them drive away in the transport he'd arranged, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and loss. He'd done the right thing, he was sure of that. But saying goodbye to Zara had been harder than he'd expected. His thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of his communication device. A message from his old intelligence contact, confirming the meeting arrangements. But there was something else, something that made his blood run cold. A secondary message, flagged as urgent. Imperial forces detected in system. Hunting party of unknown size. Exercise extreme caution. The hunters have found them. Marcus looked in the direction the transport had gone and realized that Kisara and Zara's ordeal was far from over. The Empire had tracked them across the galaxy, and they wouldn't give up easily. He made his decision quickly, climbing into his own vehicle and following the transport's route. 2 refugees and a human defection team wouldn't be enough if the Imperial hunters caught up with them. But 2 refugees, a defection team, and a human veteran with nothing left to lose? That might just be enough. The war between Marcus Chun and the Dragon Empire was about to begin. The safe house was supposed to be invisible to Imperial sensors, built into an abandoned mining facility 30 kilometers outside New Sarajevo. Terran intelligence had used it to debrief defectors for over a decade without incident. But as Marcus Chun studied the tactical display on a scanner, he could see why the Empire had found it so easily. Heat signatures, he muttered, pointing to the screen. Dragon body temperature is higher than human normal. Your people are basically walking heat sources to anyone with thermal imaging. Agent Sarah Rodriguez, the intelligence handler assigned to Kisara's defection, nodded grimly. She was a compact woman in her 30s with the kind of calm competence that Marcus recognized from his military days. "We've been monitoring Imperial ship movements since yesterday," she said. 3 vessels entered the system 12 hours ago. Fast attack corvettes, definitely military. Hunting party, Kisara confirmed from her position near the window. Even after major surgery, she moved with the fluid grace of a predator. The Empire uses 3-ship formations when they want to capture targets alive. 2 to corner, 1 to extract. Zara pressed close to her mother, golden eyes wide with fear. "They found us again." Marcus studied the tactical situation with the eye of someone who had survived too many ambushes to count. The safe house was defensible, but not against serious military hardware. The Imperial corvettes would have energy weapons that could level city blocks and armor that could shrug off anything short of ship-mounted weapons. "How long before they pinpoint our location?" he asked. Agent Rodriguez checked her instruments. "Based on their search pattern, maybe 6 hours. 8 if we're lucky." "We need to move," Marcus said. "Get them to a more secure location until extraction can be arranged." "Negative," Rodriguez replied. "Orders are to complete the debriefing here. Command wants everything Kisara knows about the bioweapons program before we risk moving her." Marcus stared at her. "Agent, there are Imperial warships in orbit. This isn't the time for bureaucratic procedures." "Those are my orders, Mr. Chun." Kisara listened to this exchange with growing alarm. "How long will this debriefing take?" "Minimum 8 hours for the full download. Possibly 12 if we encounter technical difficulties." "We don't have 12 hours," Marcus said flatly. "We might not have 6. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "Command believes the intelligence Kisara carries is worth the risk. The bioweapons data could save millions of lives." "And what about the 2 lives standing right here?" Marcus gestured to Kisara and Zara. "What happens to them if those corvettes show up before your debriefing is finished?" "We have contingency plans." Marcus had heard that phrase too many times in too many wars. It usually meant that someone important had decided that certain people were expendable for the greater good. He'd been on both sides of that equation, and he didn't like what he was seeing. "Show me the contingency plans," he said. Rodriguez hesitated. "That's classified." "Agent Rodriguez, I used to hold a security clearance higher than your current pay grade. Show me the plans." After a moment's consideration, Rodriguez activated a holographic display. The contingency plan was exactly what Marcus had feared. If Imperial forces located the safe house during the debriefing, Terran agents would fight a delaying action while Priority 1 was getting the bioweapons data to safety. Priority 2 was preserving the life of the defector. Priority 3 was protecting the child. In military terms, it meant that if things went bad, Zara would be abandoned to save a computer full of data. Marcus felt a familiar cold anger settling in his chest. "No, excuse me. I said no. I'm not letting you sacrifice that kid for your intelligence operation." Rodriguez's expression hardened. "Mr. Chun, you're a civilian contractor. You don't get to make those decisions. Watch me." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kisara watched the exchange between the two humans with growing understanding. "You would abandon my daughter?" she asked Rodriguez quietly. "I would follow orders designed to save the maximum number of lives," Rodriguez replied. "The bioweapons data you carry could prevent a genocide. One child's life, however regrettable, cannot outweigh that consideration." Kisara's eyes flashed with golden fire, and for a moment Marcus caught a glimpse of what dragon warriors must have looked like in their prime. "Agent Rodriguez, let me explain something about dragon culture that your intelligence briefings might have missed. We do not abandon our children. Ever. Under any circumstances. Dr. Kisara, I understand your feelings, but no, I do not think you do." Kisara's voice carried a harmonic undertone that made the windows vibrate slightly. "If you abandon Zara, then this defection ends immediately. I will destroy every piece of data I carry before I allow my daughter to die alone." Rodriguez looked genuinely shocked. "You would sabotage an operation that could save millions of lives to protect my child?" Without hesitation, Marcus found himself smiling despite the tension. "Agent Rodriguez, let me give you some free advice. When a dragon mother tells you she'll protect her offspring at any cost, believe her. Dragons don't bluff about family." Rodriguez stared at them both for a long moment, then activated her communication device. "Command, this is Rodriguez. We have a problem." The conversation that followed was conducted in military jargon and coded phrases, but Marcus understood enough to know that someone higher up the chain was making a very unpleasant calculation. Finally, Rodriguez signed off with a frustrated expression. "New orders. Priority 1 is still the data, but Priority 2 is now protecting both the asset and her offspring. Command is sending additional support." "How much additional support?" Marcus asked. "A full extraction team. 6 specialists plus heavy equipment. ETA. 4 hours." Marcus did the math in his head. The Imperial ships would likely find them before the cavalry arrived. "Not good enough." Rodriguez was about to respond when an alarm began sounding throughout the facility. She checked her scanners and paled. "Contact. Imperial drop pods, incoming from high orbit. ETA 6 minutes. The room erupted into activity. Rodriguez began shouting orders into her communicator while Kisara pulled Zara to the center of the room, away from the windows. Marcus grabbed his gear bag and began checking his weapons. "How many?" he asked Rodriguez. Scanners showed 12 pods. Estimate 40 to 50 Imperial soldiers. Marcus whistled low. The Empire wasn't taking chances. That was a full assault team, equipped for serious combat. "Defensive positions?" he asked. "The facility has automated defenses, but they won't hold for long against Imperial equipment." Rodriguez was frantically trying to establish communication with her backup teams. "We need to buy time for the extraction team to arrive." 4 hours is too long," Marcus said. "We need to move now. I have orders to complete the data transfer." Marcus looked at Kisara, and Zara saw the fear in the child's golden eyes and made his choice. "Then, you stay here and transfer your data. We're leaving." "Mr. Chun, you can't." "Agent, with respect, stuff your orders. I'm getting these two out of here." Kisara stepped forward. "The data transfer can be done remotely if I have the proper equipment. I will not sacrifice my daughter for your bureaucracy." Rodriguez looked like she wanted to argue, but the sound of atmospheric entry was getting louder. The Imperial drop pods would be landing in less than 5 minutes. "Fine," she said finally. "But if we're moving, we need to move now. There's a transport in the vehicle bay." They grabbed essential gear and headed for the exit. Marcus took point, his old infantry instincts kicking in as he swept each corridor before advancing. Behind him, Rodriguez carried her portable data extraction unit, while Kisara supported Zara with one arm. The vehicle bay was a cavern carved into the mountain, accessible through a tunnel that led to a concealed exit. Their transport was a military-grade hovercraft designed for rapid evacuation. It could carry 6 passengers and had light armor, but it wouldn't stand up to serious weapons fire. As they climbed aboard, the first Imperial drop pods struck the mountain above them. The impact shook dust from the ceiling and set off another round of alarms. "They're going to breach the main facility in minutes," Rodriguez said as she powered up the transport. Marcus was studying a topographical map on his scanner. "There's a network of mining tunnels running through this mountain range. We can use them to stay hidden while we move to a new extraction point. Those tunnels haven't been mapped in decades. We could get lost. Better lost than dead." Rodriguez nodded reluctantly and guided the transport into the tunnel system. Behind them, they could hear the distinctive sound of Imperial weapons fire as the attack force breached the safe house. The mining tunnels were a maze of passages carved by automated equipment over several decades. Some were wide enough for heavy vehicles, while others barely accommodated their transport. Rodriguez had to rely on Marcus's navigation skills to avoid dead ends and unstable sections. These tunnels connect to the main mining complex about 15 kilometers north, Marcus explained as they navigated a particularly narrow passage. "From there, we can reach the surface and find a new hiding spot." Zara had been quiet since they left the safe house, but now she spoke up. "They'll follow us. Imperial hunters are very good at tracking." "How good?" Rodriguez asked. Kisara answered. "They can track heat signatures through solid rock, sound patterns through dense materials. If they bring the right equipment, they'll find us eventually." Marcus digested this information while studying their route options. "Then, we don't run. We fight." "Fight?" Rodriguez stared at him. "Mr. Chun, we're talking about Imperial Marines. These aren't pirates or smugglers. They're elite soldiers with military-grade equipment. I know what they are. I've fought them before. That was during the war. You had backup, heavy weapons, air support." Marcus checked his sidearm and the demolition charges in his kit. "Agent, let me tell you something about the difference between Imperial Marines and human infantry. Imperial Marines are stronger, faster, and better equipped. But they're used to winning through superior firepower and intimidation. Human soldiers are used to winning through superior tactics and sheer bloody-mindedness. This isn't a war, Mr. Chun. It's a rescue operation." "No," Marcus said quietly, "it's both." They reached a junction where 3 tunnels intersected. Marcus studied his scanner and chose the passage that led toward the surface. But as they entered the new tunnel, Rodriguez's proximity alarms began screaming. "Contact rear," she announced tersely. "Multiple heat signatures, closing fast." Marcus looked at the scanner display. 12 contacts, moving in perfect formation through the tunnels behind them. The Imperial Marines had found their trail. "How long before they catch us?" he asked. "At current speed, maybe 10 minutes. Marcus did quick calculations. The transport could go faster, but not much faster in the confines of the tunnels. And they were still several kilometers from the surface. "Stop the transport," he said. "What?" "Stop the transport. We're going to set up an ambush." Rodriguez stared at him. "An ambush?" "Against Imperial Marines. Agent, trust me on this one. I know what I'm doing." Rodriguez brought the transport to a halt. They were in a section where the main tunnel intersected with several smaller passages, creating a natural choke point. Marcus immediately began pulling demolition charges from his kit. "Kisara, can you and Zarth get about 50 meters down the main tunnel? Take cover behind those support pillars." The dragon woman nodded and led her daughter away from the intersection. "Rodriguez, I need you to set up your portable scanner there." Marcus pointed to a position that would give her a view of all the approaches. "Call out contacts as they approach." "What are you planning?" Marcus was attaching charges to the tunnel supports with practiced efficiency. Imperial Marines are used to fighting in open terrain where they can use their superior speed and firepower. In close quarters like this, those advantages are minimized. They have to come at us through narrow passages, which means they can't spread out or use their heavier weapons without risking cave-ins. "You're going to collapse the tunnels?" "Selected sections. Channel them into a kill zone where we can engage them on our terms." Rodriguez watched him work with growing respect. "You've done this before. Centauri conflict. Tunnel fighting on Kepler 7. Imperial forces controlled the surface, so we took the fight underground." Marcus finished placing the charges, and activated the remote detonators. Learn a lot about dragon tactics in those tunnels, such as they're predictable. Dragons like to charge straight at their enemies. It's a cultural thing related to their concepts of honor and courage. Works great in open terrain, not so great when your enemy has prepared the battlefield. The scanner began picking up movement in the tunnels behind them. 12 contacts, moving in standard Imperial formation. Marcus smiled grimly. Something's never changed. Rodriguez, start the data transfer with Kisara now. We're going to buy you as much time as we can, but I want that information safely transmitted before the shooting starts. Rodriguez nodded and began setting up her portable equipment. The data transfer would take at least 30 minutes, assuming they could maintain a stable communication link with Terran Command. Marcus positioned himself behind a natural rock formation that provided cover while giving him clear fields of fire down 2 of the tunnels. His weapons were civilian grade, but he'd supplemented them with some interesting additions from his smuggling days. Contacts at 200 meters, Rodriguez called out, moving in standard sweep formation. Marcus could hear them now, the soft sound of armored boots on stone. Imperial Marines moved with a fluid grace that was distinctly non-human. Their armor would stop most small arms fire, but it had weak points if you knew where to look. 100 meters, Rodriguez reported. They're slowing down. The lead Marine appeared around a bend in the tunnel, his weapons sweeping left and right as he checked for threats. Marcus let him advance into the kill zone, waiting for more targets to present themselves. Now, he whispered and triggered the first set of charges. The explosion brought down a section of tunnel roof, cutting off the Marines' retreat and trapping 4 of them in the intersection. At the same time, Marcus opened fire with his modified plasma rifle, targeting the weak points in their armor. The Imperial Marines reacted with professional speed, taking cover and returning fire. But they were trapped in a confined space with limited cover, while Marcus had prepared defensive positions. Data transfer at 15%. Rodriguez called out over the sound of weapons fire. Marcus switched to his second position as plasma bolts seared the air where he'd been standing. The Marines were advancing, but they had to expose themselves to cross open ground. One of them tried to rush his position, moving with the inhuman speed that marked him as a dragon in humanoid form. Marcus waited until the Marine was committed to his charge, then triggered another set of demolition charges. The tunnel section collapsed, crushing the advancing Marine and creating another barrier. 30%, Rodriguez reported. The remaining Marines had learned caution. They were advancing more slowly now, using cover and suppressing fire to mask their movements. Marcus kept them pinned with sporadic fire while conserving his ammunition. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. The distinctive whine of heavy weapons being powered up. They're bringing up plasma cannons, he called to Rodriguez. Whatever armor this tunnel has, it won't stop military-grade weapons. 50% complete. Just hold them off a little longer. Marcus looked down the tunnel toward Kisara and Zora. The dragon woman had found a defensive position and was holding her daughter close. Their golden eyes met across the distance, and he saw the trust there. She was counting on him to keep her daughter safe. Marcus made his decision. Rodriguez, when I give the signal, you take Kisara and Zara and get out of here. Use the transport and head for the surface. What about you? I'm going to buy you some time. Marcus began moving forward, using the tunnel walls for cover as he advanced toward the Imperial positions. He had 1 demolition charge left, and he was going to make it count. The plasma cannon fired, sending a bolt of superheated energy down the tunnel. The rock where Marcus had been standing moments earlier simply vaporized. They were done playing games. 70%, Rodriguez called out. Marcus reached the position he wanted, a narrow side passage that would give him access to the chamber where the Marines had set up their heavy weapon. It was suicide to advance against a plasma cannon with small arms, but he wasn't planning to fight it directly. He was planning to bring the mountain down on top of it. Marcus placed his final charge against a support beam that held up a major section of the tunnel ceiling. According to his scanner, there were several thousand tons of rock directly above the Imperial position. Rodriguez, 90%. Be ready to move. Marcus activated the charge timer and began running back toward their position. He had 30 seconds before the mountain came down, and the Imperial Marines were already firing at his retreating form. 20 seconds. Plasma bolts scorched the tunnel walls around him. 15 seconds. He could see Rodriguez packing up her equipment. 10 seconds. Move, he shouted. Everyone to the transport now. 5 seconds. They were running down the tunnel toward their escape route. The explosion brought down half the mountain. The blast wave knocked them all to the ground, and falling rocks filled the air. When the dust settled, the tunnel behind them had completely collapsed. There was no sign of the Imperial Marines, and no way for them to follow. Data transfer complete, Rodriguez reported, checking her equipment. All files successfully transmitted to command. They climbed aboard their transport and headed for the surface, leaving the collapsed tunnels behind them. When they finally emerged into daylight, they could see Imperial spacecraft circling overhead, but the ships couldn't detect them through the mountain's interference. "Where do we go now?" Zara asked. Marcus checked their position on his scanner. They were still 15 kilometers from the nearest settlement, but he could see a Terran military transport approaching from the south. "Extraction team," Rodriguez confirmed. "They'll take you to a secure facility for final processing." As they waited for pickup, Kisara approached Marcus. "You saved our lives again." "We saved each other," Marcus replied. "That's what families do." Kisara smiled. "Is that what we are? A family?" Marcus looked at Zara, who was watching him with those golden eyes full of trust and affection. "Yeah," he said. "I guess we are." The extraction transport landed in a cloud of dust, and Terran soldiers emerged to secure the area. But as they prepared to board, Marcus made one final decision. "Agent Rodriguez, I'm going with them." "Mr. Chun, that's not necessary. The defection is complete." "Maybe the defection is complete, but the family isn't." Marcus looked at Kisara and Zara. "If you'll have me, I'd like to see this through to the end." Zara ran to him and hugged him tightly. "Please come with us," she whispered. "I don't want to say goodbye again." Kisara nodded solemnly. "Marcus Chun, you will always be welcome wherever we go." As they boarded the transport together, Marcus realized that for the first time since Sarah's death, he was looking forward to the future instead of running from the past. But he also knew that their troubles were far from over. The Dragon Empire wouldn't give up easily, and there would be more hunters coming. When they did, they would find that Kisara and Zara weren't alone anymore. They had a human veteran standing with them, and Marcus Chun had never lost a family he was determined to protect.